Thank you. What energy in this room. I thought they were clapping for me.
I dressed
I
for
knew
the
that was gonna
occasion.
happen.
I dressed for the occasion. You gotta, in my line of work, you gotta take advantage of all that kind of stuff.
Any chance you get to be in front of a camera, except this man's always in front of a camera. Who's
Oh no,
caught
I
him-
meant spreading the right message,
that as well,
which
of
I
course.
try to do in front of a camera, but sometimes it's easier than others.
So what would our audience have seen you on recently, celebrity chef Andrew Zimmern? You're on so many shows, I can't even keep track of them all. What are you working on right now?
I can't keep track of them all. Something happened a couple years ago called streaming television. And so things that I made 25 years ago for what became networks like Travel Channel or the early days of Food Network and stuff is now on the D+ streamer. It's crazy. I bump into young people who are like, oh my God, I saw your new show, Bizarre Foods. And I'm like, that's my old show. It's kind of a strange thing. But most recently I do a show on the Outdoor Channel called Wild Game Cooking because I believe we need to be doing more to teach people how to cook over open fire and cook foraged foods and found foods. And I think for those that take food from the outdoors, they're some of our best custodians of the environment.
Sure.
So I had an intentionality with doing that, and of course Family Dinner on Magnolia and streaming on D+ and HBO Max is a great show because I believe in celebrating American families. I think we've lost the time to connect with one another, and I actually think that both those shows have something to do with our topic today.
Yeah.
I think we've lost some of the connective magic that would allow us to elevate, appreciate, and value other people. And if we've lost that, then what we're doing is we're othering other people, just in a general way.
Exactly. We're othering other people. We're othering nature. We have to remember we're part of nature.
Yeah.
So to connect with nature, to show where our food comes from, to engage and respect the process of getting that food item from farm to from nature to plate, farm to fork, actually. That's an incredible, experience that unfortunately there's too many haven't had yet. So thank you for bringing that to audiences in America and around the world.
I appreciate that. I think if you have the ability to have a platform or have some say in what you do at work, most don't. That's an extremely precious commodity. There are a lot of people who are in the media business who need a platform, right? I'm lucky enough I have one, and if one show ends, someone comes to me the next year and another show begins. So I try to choose. I joke around the office. It doesn't matter if I'm showing up at a bus station to take a picture with someone or I'm making television. If I can't defend it with my conscience wheel, I can't do it. It's a no go for me.
You're fortunate that you can make those choices, that you can you've gotten to this point where you can choose which platforms and which messages you push forward, and one that's really important to you, based on the shirt that you're wearing, it's so clear. You literally are a walking example of a male ally to women in the food system. So why was this particular allyship?
Well, here's the thing. You're and I get it, because that's why we're here today. Why is that allyship something worth celebrating? Because other people aren't doing it. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. So we are facing on planet Earth some existential crises of all kinds, and some societal crippling issues. And I don't want to doom and gloom, but we all know what they are, right? So I sort of want to stay in solution and not, get into despair situations. But anyway, why is that special? Why isn't everyone doing that? Why should one gender, however you define that, be pushed forward in front of another? Why should anyone be marginalized in any way because of the color of their skin, their language, what spirituality system they're a part of, who they choose to love. It's mind-boggling to me. It's
100%.
absolutely,
Yeah.
it's absolutely
No,
mind-boggling
let's get
to me.
up for that.
And the reason is, and I really am a pragmatist, if we want to solve the problems that are in front of us today, and there are many, and I'm sure we'll talk about several in the 24 minutes and 50 seconds that we have left, but if we're going to solve any of those problems, we need all hands on deck.
Exactly.
And so the idea that we will learn more from a white man in business X than a, let's just say, woman of color on an island halfway around the world, I have a real problem with. We actually need to hear from both. No one's opinion should be prioritized, because we've also learned that certain people just have really shitty opinions. And no sense of expertise, and no regard for truth or science, which that's a different issue. However, as a globalist and someone who has been around the world 800 times, I have seen solutions put forth by human beings that others would marginalize, that actually hold the secret to how we solve our problems today. And it was actually Bizarre Foods and being able to go to 170 countries in 14 years and make television and be with tribal peoples, First Peoples, indigenous peoples around the world, protected tribes, and actually see the reality of what's out there, and see that in the villages in Vietnam, where they're living indistinguishably from the way they did hundreds of years ago, in rice fields and fish ponds, and in living a pastoral life, even though we think of that country as being primarily a patriarchal society, women hold an equal status in the workforce in everything that they do. There's many women working the rice fields, in the fish ponds, etc. By the way, also while holding down the home.
Right.
So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. The Himba in Namibia, it's tribal peoples. They're the ones that the women cover their bodies in ochre, a red mud, and beef tallow sort of makeup that they put all over themselves, and then bunch in their hair and bedazzle themselves with jewels. It takes about 2 hours for a Himba woman to leave the house in the morning. But everything that they put on allows them from a distance to identify how many husbands you have, how many children you have, how many goats, cows. Everything means something, if your parents are still alive, etc. And Himba women run the show, 100%. And it is still a society where the shaman and the chief of the village are only men. They make none of the decisions. It's the most magical sort of group to be a part of. And when you live with them for 2 weeks and you see the strength and the decision-making power that they give to the women, that's why I wear this t-shirt.
Nice.
Because I've seen it work better. I've seen it work better. Something happened during the election cycle a year or two ago, and then we'll get into your questions. I know you got a lot of them. But there was a lot of talk, especially in the circles that I travel with, about the power of women of color to change our society. And we saw it play out in a lot of state elections, and also in a lot of volunteerism that resulted in some national election changes and things like that. And I made a statement in social media that got more positivity than I imagined, but the negativity was insane. And the statement that I made, was, I'm fine if women of color run the whole country for us.
Was this on Twitter?
It was on Twitter.
Okay.
Pre-Elon Musk, but still like a gotcha situation. I was sort of exaggerating to make a point. I wasn't trying to take away my own personal right to vote. In full transparency, I'm an old white man. just to make it very clear to you. However, when you see the power of activism and right-sized thinking that was exhibited in the last election cycle by women of color in almost every important state that you could imagine, and by women in general, I just said to my friends, I said, this is why the idea of stepping aside is okay. It doesn't mean I'm giving up my vote. I still get to vote. One person, one vote. That's what this country is all about. I'm just talking about who works hardest, who's making the right decisions, who's most aligned with my way of thinking. I encourage everyone to make that decision for themselves. But I'm just fine with some of, with
There's room for other perspectives.
Of course there is.
There's absolutely enough room.
Of course there is.
We've got like infinite space, especially on the internet now.
That's right.
To the Twitter trolls who just heard that, feel free to dig that up. We're okay with it.
Yeah,
Everyone here is okay with it. Go ahead and flag it.
It's fine. I honestly think we had to take it down because on Twitter, people will keep something alive on your feed for like months and months. And so we're trying to also tell people, tune in Saturday nights at 8 o'clock. I mean, that's how I feed my family, right? And so you can't do that when other people are, calling you names.
Yeah, fair enough.
But anyway,
from your
enough of my socialist utopian outlook.
Well, I mean,
carry on, doctor.
You definitely have. Thank you for that. If you're going to call me doctor, I'm going to call you chef. We've got to get to Andrew and shut that.
Okay,
and
that's fine.
I was going to say Andrew, and I was really proud of myself. Look, I made the transition. Everyone can learn. We have, millions tuning in right now from countries around the world through the We Don't Have Time platform, including Vietnam, over 160 countries. We have young people, all demographics, that are listening to you, that are trying to figure out what they can do to also become that ally. And you just shared such an incredible story of this community in Vietnam. What else have you seen? And how can you encourage those that may not have the resources or think they have the resources readily available to them to start getting engaged and getting involved? What's the best way?
If you're listening to this or seeing this, either one, that means you have a device that allows you to spread information at an astonishing rate. And I tell people all the time, some of us are in a position to write a check. Other people are in a position to say, hey, I heard a really interesting idea, and broadcast it to every single human being they know in their email list, their social list, both. I would start there. Second thing that I would do, if everyone chose one woman to mentor or elevate, one, imagine what that would do in the world right now. There are parts of my life where I believe I need to sort of stay in my own boat, right? And then there are places in my life where I believe I have to step forward and work on elevating someone who is, I believe, in the best interest of society, worth elevating. Because until we have true equality, we cannot operate as our best as a society and as a culture in anything we choose to do.
Absolutely.
Anything.
Let's give it up for that. That is so true.
So if I believe that, right, that's a very simple idea. And I know there's people in the audience saying, well, I want more granular information. And sometimes it's okay to be at 1,000 feet above sea level, because then you get the question that you ask, what can I do, right? So I'll just give a small example in my own life, and I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just a very simple idea. So I went on a television show that was called All-Star Academy, ran for a couple seasons on Food Network. It was a great show. I don't know why they canceled it. It really should be going on loud and strong. And the idea was, there were like 4 celebrity chefs and 12 amateur cooks, and we drafted. We saw videos of them, and we saw them make a dish, and then we drafted them, and we tried to mentor that team that we got, and then try to win this competition, mentoring along the way. And the skills that we were teaching our mentees were the ones that would eventually help us to win or allow them to win, right? And I chose, this is like 8 years ago, I chose the 2 youngest women. I just thought that that's a challenge. Someone else, an unmentioned celebrity chef, chose the most skilled older people, and they wound up winning. But I personally thought I won. Not in the eyes of the judges or the scores. I'm still in touch with both of those women. I still mentor one of them, who is a young woman of color. And it's one of the things that I look at with the most amount of pride, because she tells me that it was that experience, not on set, but away from set, that we stayed in touch, that I gave her opportunity, that I brought her with me She wants to be a chef and doesn't know quite how to figure that out while being a mom, and she's young. But by bringing her everywhere with me, where I can, where it's possible, and elevating her and putting her forward is me just choosing that one woman of color one day, right? And so I do this multiple times, and I just saw her in Miami. She and her husband are doing great. She's had her second baby. She is just the living embodiment of bliss. And when she returns to the workforce, I'm going to continue to help her, because she's someone who the world needs to hear more from. And not because I think she's smarter or better, just because as a mom who's had her life experiences, I know that she's better off being in a decision-making of power than a male colleague. And the reason is, I find a lot of young men come at things with a more ego and want the story to be about them. When I talk to young women in culinary schools or kitchens or whatever, they don't use the word I as much. They use the word we more. And kitchens are teams. And I think that as a food person, when I look out at everything that I've seen in other countries, women are working harder because they've had the odds stacked against them for longer. And so someone in their family has leaned over, mom, a grandmother, a mentor, and said, gotta work 10% harder. Gotta work 10% harder. And so I'd rather bet, that's why the future is female. If I'm betting on women because they're working harder. Nothing against men. That's just my experience.
Yeah, can you imagine if we didn't have sexism, if we didn't have racism, if we didn't have homophobia, we wouldn't be in this crisis. We wouldn't be in this climate crisis. If we had invested the time and resources into creating that equal society and culture to begin with, there would be nowhere to actually cite a polluting factory. We would actually have those intrinsically more inclined towards caring for their communities and the planet, part of the decision-making table.
Well, it all starts with access to education and opportunity. Then it becomes access to money, right? And if we don't clear away those two issues first and foremost, we're fucked. And we have too many problems in this case. We need all hands on deck. I do not want 65% of people under the age of 18 in America to have access to a quality education and be able to get every book and every meal while they can, right? I'm fighting very hard Minnesota just passed a law, thank you to Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and Governor Walz in our state for having the foresight to create a universal lunch program. States are doing that because the federal government won't. Stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. We should be feeding kids. We have an outlet. They're called schools. They can get meals. They can get 3 a day. Why would we ever want, is anyone out there for hungry children? Anyone for it? Raise their hand. No, right. Please disregard, that was an accidental hand raise from a very nice lady in the 4th row. And I sit there when I'm testifying at state houses and in Washington, D.C., and I ask decision makers, are you for hungry children? Because otherwise, let's just feed everyone in school. By law, by the power of law, if someone can't afford a school book, they get the school book, okay? That's what the law says. So we're good at that. 100% of the kids that need it get the books. Why don't they get the food? Because the books are useless if you're hungry. You won't remember what's in the book. It drives me nuts. So let's start with education and then get in, to the dollars. But it all, I guess, kind of starts with making sure we have the laws. We have to give the laws teeth to be able to be enforced so that nobody is marginalized that way. Now, that's very tough when we have a large percentage of Americans who believe that certain people don't have the same right to vote, despite all you have to do is be 18 and a citizen. That's it, full stop. Right. 18 and a citizen, you get to vote. But there are people who believe in voter suppression because they're scared that we're going to become a majority-minority country. I think if we were a majority-minority country, the benefits are phenomenal. And so I see the positive in that. There's a long list of positive. There's a very small piece of negative. And sadly, there are people who are living, making fear-based solutions, who are interfering with true equality happening across the board for everyone. And it starts with young people.
And are these people pro-hungry children? These sound like... They just don't get it. They don't get the connection.
No, they do. They do get the connection. But
So
what they're doing is
devil.
they're prioritizing self over others. And I think the late Senator Paul Wellstone, who was my political mentor, had a very famous phrase: "We all win when we all win." And it's a very, very simple piece of, garage logic, right? I mean, you don't have to be, a Harvard MBA to understand the concept that we're all better off when everyone is better off. And I am, by the way, I am a capitalist. I'm not talking about, other types of systems. I mean, was it Churchill who said democracy is one of the worst political systems in the world until you can show me a better one?
Somebody Google that real quick.
Something like that.
Sure.
But the idea that we all win when we all win should just be a very basic and fundamental piece of how we think. Now, how we put that in place has to be done one block at a time, and we have to start. I think it starts with education and access, and that starts with laws, and that starts with how we vote for people. And yes, to answer your question, there are people who are voting to make fear-based decisions. They're using their own fear about losing their piece of blank. And by the way, that is embedded in the American psyche. It goes back to the border wars that predated the Civil War, where people were worried about losing slaves. Our country was founded, sadly, on a slave agriculture system. That's how states got wealthy. That's how things began here. And so fundamentally, we have to dismantle that foundational piece that can only be done with laws.
Okay, so I hear you. We need to improve policies. We need to actually implement legislation.
Mm-hmm.
We also need a shift in cultural norms. How do we do that? Is it just about the laws? I heard you going backwards from, okay, we have to vote. We have to get the policies in place. But what about the ground up effort to really change the cultural norms throughout society?
That's where, okay, so if you want to win the vote, you have to have the majority, okay? So I think that's where we get back to your first question. That's something simple we can do today, right? And that is turn to whatever side and elevate the woman next to you. I believe very strongly that if we do that, regardless of the gerrymandering and the voter suppression that a lot of people believe is the secret to maintaining the status quo, if we're going to dismantle the status quo is not working. Anyone can see that. Pick whatever silo you want, right? We're losing the education war. We're losing the energy war. We're losing everything, right? Our country is losing status around the globe. There's so many different issues. I worry about our economy. I worry about the world that my child is inheriting. I am the biggest patriot I know. I love this country, right? And I love all the good things about it. I just want to fix the stuff that's broken and not working. So if we raise up the people who have been kept down, then I think the laws change, because we then have it's why voter suppression is such an enormous issue in this country. It's why allyship is so important. It's not good enough to just say something. We have a saying in a support group that I'm a member of that's like,
so many more questions.
You have to be a say-do person. If you say it, do it, right? We have the person who runs our businesses back in my office is a woman, right? We have a majority of women in our companies. When you count heads everywhere, we're actually doing, and we're actually not doing any sort of preferential hiring policies, all we're doing is broadening our ideas so it's not the first white guy that walks in the door that has the resume and like, you're it. We want to look at everyone because we believe in our businesses, the greater the number of ideas and experiences around the table produces the best product. And there are scientific studies
There's science
that back,
behind that. I was just going to say that.
That back that. That's
underline,
you,
underline, underline.
You know, I mean, you can speak to that better than I can, but it's like, it's just a fact. So why wouldn't, if I want my businesses to thrive and I want to put food on my table, that's what I want. So it's both selfish and selfless, personally, for me to engage in that kind of activity.
So I plan to come to agriculture sooner in the conversation, but I love this conversation. I love what you are standing for, how inspiring you are to men and women, and really showcasing the science behind, it's just not a nice to have, but there's real science behind why it's important to bring different perspectives to the table. It's better for culture, it's better for your bottom line, your business bottom line ultimately. So whatever resonates with you, take that away because there is a positive outcome in supporting women and being allies to women. So I love that we spent the time we did on this conversation. But you are a chef. You are not just any chef. You are a true household name in America, around the world. And from that vantage point, in the last few minutes that we have, I'd be curious for your perspective on, and it's a big question I know, why men dominate this field, food and agriculture, and how can we think about making it more equal?
Well, it goes to the same point. I think we're changing in the right direction. I think if you talk about, let's set aside the food system and the supply chain and farming and all that kind of stuff for a second and just talk about the most public-facing side of things, which is probably restaurant culture, right? We had some horrific issues in that you know, this, you know, I mean, it's not my words, but, you know, the Me Too, #MeToo thing brought to light that I think the restaurant industry took advantage of and made a lot of changes that they don't get credit for. At no time in American history have we had as many females and women of color in leadership positions in kitchens. Now, is it enough? No. Are we at some sort of equal balancing act, whatever that is, however you define it? Not yet. But we've gotten there pretty darn fast. And when people look at restaurant groups that are inspiring and making changes that are creating publicly accessed blueprints for how to make that change. On the health wellness side, you have Jen Heidinger, whose organization is called Giving Kitchen, that people can go find out all about. And then you have chefs around America, everyone from one side of the country, Ashley Christensen on one side with her group out of Raleigh-Durham, and Dominique Crenn or Suzanne Goen out in California. Chefs who have created small empires from which they are feeding women back out into this workforce. We celebrate talent. It's a very equitable system in the restaurant world. If you can do the job better, you got the job, right? The problem was we weren't giving women the opportunity. And that comes from a 19th century mindset that says this is a tough job, men are stronger, women can't do it, right? And I think we're finally, at least I think when it comes to how we define strength, and I know this is a crazy thing to point to, but I think one of the big sea changes was watching the U.S. women's national team be so dominant starting in the 90s with that, you know, original Brandi Chastain where she ripped off her jersey after she kicked the winning goal at the World Cup or Olympics. I'm forgetting which one. But it was a moment where men looked and said, wow, those are some really strong women, right? And now you can see in the I do a lot of work with the WNBA and specifically with the Minnesota Lynx because I live in Minneapolis, so that's nearby. Our view of women is and it goes beyond someone saying, you know, we birth children, name something harder, right? There isn't. But I think we now have put to bed that cliche, and so the opportunity has opened up. So I'm feeling really bullish about it. But I believe very firmly, because you got to grow where you're planted, right? I'm in the food space. I need to elevate women in restaurants, in our food businesses, everywhere that I can, and most of it touches food, the other stuff touches media, to raise up women in that space. I think it goes back to that same thing. One person, everyone, pick one person. We're done, game over.
This is the call to action we're going to leave you with then. Thank you so much, Andrew. It is a pleasure to speak to you every single time. Let's put our hands together for Chef Andrew Zimmern. And the call to action to those here at South by Southwest, at South by Southwest Center, to those tuning in from around the world, you heard it here on this International Women's Month. What we can do is really support and ally, help that one woman out, and see how amazing that
Can I add
are.
one thing? The other way you can do it, support women-owned businesses. The ones that are already there, which is a very, we can vote with our wallets.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, sir.